Did you recently suffer a loss and inherit a sizable IRA? And are you aware of the 10-year rule? If you're not, please pay attention to this. If you are aware of it, please watch because there are some really big gotchas along with this new rule, and I want to make sure that you're taken care of. All right, so before 2020, your heirs could do what's called a stretch IRA, where if you had a Roth IRA, they could keep that in their Roth IRA as an inherited Roth for their entire life. So they could go 40 years and still keep that Roth compounding at a tax-free basis. Then they could give it to their heirs and they could let it grow. And so Uncle Sam decided, hey, we need that tax money. So they created in the Secure Act in 2019 a new rule where all of those funds have to be out within 10 years if you aren't an eligible designated beneficiary. And so I'll get into what that definition is just momentarily. Now, the new rule is everything has to be empty within 10 years. And this applies to traditional IRAs, to Roth IRAs, also applies to your retirement accounts like your 401ks and your thrift savings plan. All right, so who is an eligible designated beneficiary? This new law affects adult children, grandchildren, friends that are younger than 10 years, younger than you are. It affects all of those heirs. Who does it not affect? It doesn't affect eligible designated beneficiaries. So who is that? That is your spouse. Regardless of age, if your spouse is 15 years younger than you, it doesn't matter. They are still an eligible designated beneficiary and they can still use that stretch rule. Now, if you give it to your brother and your brother is, let's say, 9 years younger than you, they are still an eligible designated beneficiary. If you decide to give it to your next door neighbor who you barely know and they're only 9 years younger than you, it is still good. They are still an eligible designated beneficiary and they're able to keep that going. Now, there are some exceptions to this, and the exceptions are, again, that surviving spouse, a minor child, but only while they're a minor. So when they're at the age of majority, bang, the 10-year clock starts. If you're disabled or chronically ill, there are some exceptions. So if that may or may not apply to you, I encourage you to do research on whether that would affect you. And then again, less than 10 years below the decedent. All right, so how does this rule work? So the account must be empty on December 31st of the 10th year following the year of death. So for an example, if you were to pass away, today is August 10th of 2025, then the account would have to be emptied by December 31st of 2035 because the clock would start on January 1st of 2026, and then the 10 years would go until the end of 2035. So if you just want to do the rough math, super easy. If they died in 25, has to be emptied by 35. And it has all the way until December 31st. Now, here's where it gets into the tricky part is, was the decedent already taking their RMDs? If they were already taking their RMDs, then you too must take an RMD. It's like a faucet. Once the faucet turns on, you can't turn it off. So if they were taking their RMDs, you have to take the RMDs. Now, if they weren't taking their RMDs, you do not have to take an RMD. So if it's a relatively small amount, let's say you just inherited $10,000, $20,000, you could let it grow all 10 years and then take it out at the end with that larger hit at the end. Now, if it's a very large amount, you want to consider some other options here. Now, there is a miss penalty. If you miss your RMD, then there is a 25% penalty on that. You can knock it down to 10% if you file the appropriate forms within 2 years of when that RMD was due. So if that's a player in there, I encourage you to talk with your CPA or whoever does your taxes and get that squared away. Now, when those funds come out, if it's in a traditional IRA, it's now in an inherited traditional IRA, it is now taxable income whenever it comes out. If you inherited a Roth IRA, well, good for you, because that is now tax-free. So thank whoever passed away, because they just left you a very nice present. Now, there's a big warning here. If you wait until that 10th year to take it out of an inherited traditional IRA, all of that income in that 10th year counts as income in that 1 year, and it can spike you into a very high tax bracket. And even if you take the RMDs, this doesn't solve the problem because they're taking out a relatively small amount each year. And if you've got it invested in, let's say, the S&P 500 or 100% diverse worldwide equity fund, it may produce more income than you've actually taken out. So not only do you still have that large sum in there, but it may be larger than when you started. All right, so here's an example of a 50-year-old with RMDs due. So this means the decedent was over the age of when they were required to take their RMDs. So if they passed away today, they would likely have been on the 73-year rule. If you're a little bit younger, it's going to be 75 for us. But if they were already taking their RMDs and then it was inherited by a 50-year-old, this is what it would look like. So with that 50-year-old, if they started with $1 million, their first RMD in that first year would be $29,240. But after growth for that year, that balance has now increased to $1,075,720. So it's gone up. And this continues through each year until the final end, where this account balance is now over $2.3 million and it has to be emptied in that 10th year. So that $2.3 million, well, the vast majority of it is going to be taxed at the absolute highest tax bracket. All right, so how do we solve this? So first, we spread those withdrawals either evenly or strategically over 10 years. And then we consider Roth conversions before the date of death. So if you're an older person that there is a large amount in that account, well, then take care of your heirs and start doing those Roth conversions for them so that those can become an inherited Roth IRA and it won't have that big of a tax impact. And especially if you, as the older person, is in a very low tax bracket and your heirs are in a very high tax bracket, then you definitely want to consider some Roth conversions and you take up the tax bill at your tax bracket so that the heirs don't have to take it at their tax bracket. There are some options here. If you plan to give to charity, well, then maybe you give the tax deferred account or a portion of it to charity to help solve this problem. There are also some complex trusts that you can put in place where a charitable remainder trust. So if you do think that this is going to be a serious problem for your heirs, I would encourage you to talk with somebody that engages with charitable remainder trusts and things like that to see if that might be appropriate for you. And please, by all means, model it however you can. If you work with an advisor, ask them to model it and write capital for you, or you can use some Excel spreadsheets. But please make sure that you take this seriously. All right, so here's the different example. Same person, they inherited that $1 million. And how do they spread it more like peanut butter over the 10 years? Well, that withdrawal amount, now this is a nice steady 11% per year, every year. Market's never going to behave like that, but they would have to take out just under $170,000 a year. So that's almost 17% of that portfolio each year. So this would be something that you would want to work with somebody, either a tax professional or a financial planner, to see, hey, what would be most appropriate? And then as the account balance changes, like maybe it's a down year, maybe it's an up year, whatever it is, you may adjust that amount in order to try to get that even spread. But you also may have different factors like, hey, a bonus came in, or my spouse is going to be working for the first 5 years, but then she's not going to be working for the next 5 years, or vice versa. So everybody's life is different. And so each person may have a different plan on how to empty this out in the most tax efficient way possible. All right, so those key takeaways is this 10-year rule has definitely changed the landscape on all traditional IRA inheritance planning. And those large IRA bills, they can really become traps. We're going to see here in that 2031 timeframe where all of a sudden now this 10-year rule is going to hit people. And there's going to be a lot of people with very large tax bills in 2031 because of this. So please make sure you're doing some careful planning to avoid these unnecessary taxes. And again, that optimal solution may change over time and certainly is going to change with the markets and how they perform. So please, I would encourage you to work with a CFP or another tax advisor on any of these plan distributions. If you'd like help, reach out to me. I'd be glad to help you. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like it, go ahead and subscribe. And if you've got a question or if you have other concepts that you would like to see presented, please throw it down in the comments. I'd be happy to answer them. Thanks. Information provided in this video is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, tax, or legal advice. I am not your financial advisor, and you should consult with a qualified professional before making any financial decisions. All investments involve risks, including the potential loss of principal. Past performance is not indicative of future results. This video does not endorse any specific investment or strategy. By watching this video, you agree that I am not responsible for any financial outcomes based on the information provided.